Recording in progress. Okay, we have about 2 more minutes and we're going to get started. Glad to see smiling faces, even though you're muted. I know you're smiling in the background. Okay, 1 more minute.
Was that Tracy?
No, that was another person that's saying that they didn't get the login, but I told them just go back and use the same one. It's the same login that we've used since we started.
Tracy trying to get in.
Okay. Okay. It is 7 a.m. somewhere, but it's 7 p.m. here. So good evening, everybody. Welcome. Glad to see everybody's here. I see a few people. Maybe this is your first time being in this new series. The topic for this lecture series is called Black Labor. And I'm going to kind of take you on a journey with this particular topic. I'm going to take you on a journey of about 5,000 years of how Black labor has been used from 5,000 years ago, building the pyramids, up forward to now, to the creation of different labor unions, labor strikes, all kinds of racism. And so hopefully you will learn something, and there's some new information that you didn't know before. So we're going to go, again, start actually about 3,000 years ago and then come forward. So without further ado, let me get started. And okay. As I said, how racism and white supremacy has affected all of us. Topic today, Black labor. And Black labor has been misconstrued or talked about and not necessarily and always in a positive manner, because a lot of people think about Black labor as for slavery. But I'm going to show you some things that we can be proud of that Black labor has done. And I'm going back 5,000 years ago. Okay, Black labor, the building of the pyramids, and this is 5,000 years ago. Our people were very skilled. We were not slaves. What you see on on this picture, a lot of white archaeologists or Egyptologists or chematologists sometimes like to say that the pyramids and everything that, I mean, Egypt was used to built by Black slaves. But I want to tell you that that is not true. These people were not slaves, they were employed by them. And the number of people could have been somewhere to build a pyramid, somewhere between 20,000 to 30,000 people. And but they were not slaves. And but you can see here from the picture on the left-hand side, they were skilled people. They knew what to do, how to build it, and they had they had architects and astronomers working with them to build pyramids that are directly aligned with the stars. And this is, again, somewhere around 3000 BC. And I understand that this was going on when white people or Europe was still in the Ice Age. So we were building civilizations when they were still in caves and wearing fur, animal fur, and eating, cannibalizing themselves and eating, dinosaurs or whatever kind of meat they had. So we have been civilized a whole lot longer than they have, but they always want to tell us that we are not civilized, we are inferior. Inferior people don't build pyramids, don't build sphinx, don't carve out walls and mountains and stone, as I'm going to show you in the next slide. This is, we're going to come forward. This is one of the kings in Egypt, Ramesses II. And Ramesses was a famous, if not one of the greatest pharaohs of ancient Kemet. He had military and cultural achievements that most people would, in that field, would die to have. But he was known as a great leader, and he had a passion for building monuments. And this is one of the monuments that he built. And if you see those people down in the lower, kind of almost right-hand corner, that could have been me or my sister or one of my children, and a lot of people that I knew that we went our first expedition to Egypt. But you can see that the hieroglyphics and this is the side of a mountain, because this is the tomb for Ramesses II. This is where one of his burial sites is. And he was one of the absolute, like say, a famous, because there were different Ramesses. But Ramesses II, I think they say he had somewhere in the neighborhood of about 500 children, because he had 8 wives, and which some of us would say, oh my goodness. So anyway, but yeah, he helped populate his city at that time. But all of these, this was built by Black laborers, but they were skilled Black laborers. So moving forward, this is also a time when we are talking about the methodology in building pyramids. And these were Black people, and there was no pictures of these people except for pictures on walls in the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of Queens, and in Cairo and Khufu and Abu Simbel. And these are places in Cairo or in Kemet or Egypt that you find all kinds of temples, and that our people, Black people, people of color, not African Americans, but people of color in those times that built those things. And like I said, that they had skills. So I'm gonna show you the skills they had. This is, you can't find any pictures other than what the perception is of how you build a pyramid. But this is what they think that they use as a step-by-step guide to building a pyramid. This is a 5,000-pound block that they built, and you can see over in the left-hand corner that they built these pyramids, and what people and archaeologists and chematologists think, because they don't really know, they think this is the way that our people, as you can see, they're people of color that are building these pyramids, and they built an incline in order to move these blocks on sleds across sand in the Nile River in order to build this. This is just one way of thinking. I've seen other ones that they think that they built some kind of a crane made out of wood to help lift them up. So they don't really know, because the Egyptians did. That's one of the things they did not leave them, was a blueprint on how they built them. And understanding that a pyramid was built as a temple, as a tomb for a king. As soon as a king or a queen was born, they started on these. And these pyramids could take almost 20 years to build. So this is kind of the first steps, and you can see that these are some of the guys. They're talking about the incline, how they would slope it in order to bring the blocks, and how they use manpower. And you can see that the skilled labor, they use these pulleys here, and also to help pull them, and men pulling directly. So they use, a lot of different forces to move those blocks. So these are the so-called inferior people that can't think, people that are inferior to white people that built civilizations before white people became white people. So as you see, my goal is to show you that our people were not inferior. We were not slaves during that particular time. Okay, Kemet pyramid construction, same thing. You can see here that they're using these pulleys and their sleds, and they're using an angle, and the angle is very important to moving it at a pace. If it was any steeper, it would be harder. But if it was they needed to go to the next level, they just kept building these sled ramps normally at a 10% or no more than a 20% angle. And you can see here that these pyramids were designed, and they were because of the archaeologists, the mathematicians that our people did. They were directly aligned with the suns and the stars. And according to my research, I think now this is 5,000 years later. It's only about 1/10 of an inch off from where it used to be when they built it 5,000 years. And that 1/10 of an inch is just because of the earth shifting and like that. But they were accurate. Very accurate. But this particular one also is called the beer archaeologists in Kemet. And they actually served beer to the people that were building. And since when have you heard of them serving beer to slaves? So, and they were actually called beer because they gave them a ration of beer every day. I mean, that was just in addition to the pay that they were getting. So again, the idea that all of this is designed to show that our people were geniuses, and we still are geniuses. Okay, but now this one we're talking about, Black people went from building civilizations, what I just showed you, to being slaves in somewhere 2,000 or 3,000 years. if the pyramids were built, started to be built, and some were built from 3000 BC all the way up to, 1000 BC, and then you get maybe 1500 years from year 0 to maybe 1500 AD, it's when they started to raid Africa, because Egypt is in Africa, remember, and Kemet. They started to raid Africa and build and go over there and get Black labor. So this is a picture of, we went from being worshipped as kings and queens and building these statues here, which are, again, are 60 some feet tall and they're on the side of a mountain, to living in huts or living in shacks as being slaves. And slavery is, well, the duration of slavery as a law is only about 200 years, 250 years. But we go back and things that we've done thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So we went from being successful Black laborers to being Black laborers that are slaves. Fast forward again, the transatlantic slave trade. African people were captured and transported to Americas to work, to be slaves. That's the only reason that they went after, because they had wanted America. They needed America cleaned, they cultivated, the land cleared, and the American Indians, the indigenous people that lived here, were not designed, or they were not meant or made good slaves. So our people were hardworking people. So that's why they went to Africa and to get people to bring to America. Initially, and a lot of people are not sure about this, initially they were the Pope in England and in Italy, and the King in England, and the government of Portuguese origin, and a lot of other European countries. They sent their ships to Africa to get slaves, and then they brought them back to their home country before they sent them over there. But they decided that they were going to shorten that and change it and just send the ships to Africa, and then from Africa they would go directly to places west of the Americas, South America, North America, Canada, all Brazil, all those countries. So all those countries were populated initially by people of color. Okay, I found this in my research from the Library of Congress. This is supposed to be the oldest photograph of enslaved people, because you have to remember, most of the stuff that I've just been showing you is were, pictures, a hand or drawings of people being enslaved. They didn't show, but this was supposed to have been the oldest one, and it was done in 1850, and it was done what they call a daguerreotype. And what that meant was, this particular type is what in a photograph, that it was they put the picture on a metal plate. So this picture was very valuable. And this picture was taken in Greene County, Georgia. For all those that are in Georgia, you got some history here. Now, this picture was sold, listen to this now, this picture was sold for $324,500. Let me say that again. This picture was sold for $324,000. And guess what? Black people don't own the picture. They love our history. They want us. They make money off of us still, but we don't get any compensation for it. They took pictures of us being slaves. Now this is one picture that I found also, black gold. What is black gold? We are black gold. The world saw blacks and their labor as a source of wealth. Translated, black gold. Children picking cotton, women picking cotton, men picking cotton. Cotton was the original source for our slavery. That's what they brought us here for. Then they went on to get sugar, uses it to grow sugar, and to grow other natural resources in America. And that because England is a cold place, that they didn't grow things like cotton. They didn't know how to, but they used the cotton and the invention of the cotton gin later on. And those were the sources of why they went and stole us from Africa, the original ones. Okay, picking cotton from dawn to dusk. This is a scene of men and women and children picking cotton, and they had a watchful eye. Some shows or movies that we've seen, they always had an overseer or what we called a guard, and the overseer would make sure that they worked. They started picking cotton from sunup to sundown, or from dawn to dusk. They did not have a day off until they started letting Black people go to church, because they were running away. So they decided to let a lot of them off on Sunday to rest and so-called worship. And they were introduced to the white man's Christianity, version of Christianity, which they told them in the Bible it was okay for them to be slaves. We didn't know the difference because we couldn't read. So the original pastors were very ignorant pastors. And I think last session, I talked about Uncle Tom and Sambo. Well, the original pastors were not Uncle Toms, they were Sambos. A Sambo is a person that shuffles and bows his head and say, "Yes, Master, please, thank you, Master. Whatever you say, Master. You the boss, Master." Uncle Tom was actually misrepresented in the book. He was not a Sambo. So this is just, but during the slavery period, they had so many runaway slaves, rebellions, uprisings. So they decided to take the foot off our neck for one day, which is Sunday. And the only reason that we are Christians today, let me say that again, and I don't want to offend anybody, but the only reason we are Christians today is because the white man decided to let us go to church, indoctrinate us into the Bible, and indoctrinate us into Christianity. And I'm going to talk about religion in 2 weeks. And I'm going to tell you some things that you really did not know, because just a glimpse of it is that there was a big up-to-do, and they went back and forth whether to make Black people Christians or not, because they said, well, if we make them Christians, then they can't be property. They're more than 3/4 of a human being. So we're going to talk about that in 2 weeks, though. Okay, so this is just how they kept us enslaved from dawn to dusk. Now we talking about capitalism. Now, capitalism, American capitalism, is brutal because it's built on the backs of slave men and women and children. We made America the great country that it is, not white people. They enslaved us to do the work that they were too weak or too hard, because this is a wilderness. America was a wilderness, and they bought slaves to clear the land, plant all of the crops, and make it. So in order for you to understand the brutality of the capitalistic society, is that you have to start with the plantation. And this is a capitalistic society that we have. It is a feudalistic mantra that seems to get repeated to anyone who questions why America can't be more fair and equal. But around the world, there are many types of capitalism, ranging from liberating capital societies to exploratory capitalism, protective to abusive, from democratic to unregulated. So there are all these different kinds that go from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, how they treat their Black labor or how they treat labor, period. When Americans declare that we live in a capitalistic society, what they're actually saying is they're talking about how they are defending a brutal economy, because it's built on brutality. They use the word capitalist, but and there are many books out there for all of you that are looking to find out more that bridges that gap or talks about how the capitalistic system was developed on the backs of our people and slaves. And it was it is a brutal system. Okay, moving forward. Now, after the Emancipation Proclamation was done and so-called freed the slaves, and with the proclamation that Lincoln signed, people decided that was in the South, that they could not have that. So they came up with all different kinds of laws. Now, let's say like 150 years ago, a prison complex known as Lone Rock Stockade operated at one of the biggest coal mines in Tennessee. It was powered by Black men who have been arrested for minor offenses like stealing a pig. If they committed any crime at all, women, children, and some as young as 12 were sent there as well. The work was dangerous. A lot of them got killed. And the state developed a system, and we're going to talk about real quick. The state developed a system called convict leasing. And I'll explain what that means. But they charge the companies that they lease these convicts to, they charged them a fee. So this was a different form of slavery. They were theoretically free people, but they were arrested. So they made a pact or contract with a prison system to take these Black people that were free, but they didn't have a job. They may have had skill sets, but make them work and get, because they were in prison. Some of them were arrested, like I said, being vagrant, being homeless. All those things were a crime back then. And that's how, but it was established, those are kind of like the Black codes. They're established to make our people start working for free, trying to get their free labor way. And this convict leasing was established in states like Tennessee, Texas, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. And let's look at exactly, now I'm going to show you a picture, and it's, to me, it's heartbreaking, but I think I need to show it to you. What is convict leasing, or how they convict convicts? And yes, these are little boys. Some of them, V looked at this and said, I think some of these are younger than 12. They were, but they have prison outfits on. They have chains on. Convict leasing was essential to the new form of slavery started after the Civil War and went on for decades in the South. States and companies got rich by arresting Black men and Black boys and forcing them to work for major companies. Now, I did some research, and there are a lot of major companies that we do business with, that you do business with, banks that finance some of these, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, that we finance our own slavery. And everybody heard me say this last lecture, that we need to start asking our Black churches, where's our money going? We take our money from the parishioners through tithes and offerings, put it in, and you think that that is going to help keep your church alive, which it does, but you don't, the other side of it is going to a white bank, and our money is going to help white businesses, because their white bank loans money to them and they reinvest the money. So they're making money off of us, but some of us have a hard time finding money to get to start a business, to buy a house, or just a loan to keep surviving, buy a car. So I just want you to think about that. For all of you that go to church, ask your church, where do you put that money come Sunday night or Monday morning? Do you put it in a Black bank? And just think about it. If every Black church in America put their money in a Black bank, and if they went to that Black bank before and said, okay, we're going to start depositing our money in your bank. We want you to start being kind, and loan money back to Black businesses. Don't you think that this wealth gap that they keep talking about, that would change a lot? But we are contributing to our own demise by putting that money in a white bank. We got to start sticking together, and we talked about that, a couple of weeks ago. We got to stop thinking individualism and start thinking we. Okay. Again, moving forward, large plantations that were where cotton was king. Those that were searching for reasons that the American economy is uniquely severe and unbridled with brutality have found their answer in places like religion and politics and culture. But recently, historians have pointed out that they had fields of cotton in Georgia and Alabama that are same thing, that just like they had slave blocks or auction blocks. And this was a picture of slaves in a warehouse taking the cotton that the other slaves brought in from the field. So by the end of the Civil War, Mississippi Valley was home to more millionaires. And let me say that again. After the Civil War, the Mississippi Valley, up and down the Mississippi Road in the South, had more millionaires per capita than any other place in America at that time, because of free labor, on the backs of our people, and they grew cotton that they sold all over the world. So it's just another reason to understand how we are contributing to the wealth of America, but we are not getting any payback. You know, we built the White House, we built the Capitol, we built so many different things. And just like I talked about the Washington Monument, and I want to ask y'all a question. Do you remember what I said about the Washington Monument and what it represented? Because it represents something, and it's important that we understand what it represents. Because Isis, a queen in Egypt, had what is called the Washington Monument now, but it is originally an obelisk or a tekken. So once we get to the end, I'm going to ask the question, what do you remember about what I said about the Washington Monument? Because those monuments stand all over the world. There's one right outside the window of the Pope. There's one every place. They're in cemeteries. But what do they stand for? Okay. Fast forward it again. Now we're starting to talk about coming to another era, and first all Black Union was formed. We decided to, out of many, many fights, that we needed to be unionized because they didn't want us to have, better jobs. So we had to join the union, and then started with the world wars. They were machinists, they were carpenters, they were all kinds of what I call war-driven industrial complexes that our people tried to get in. So this is some information I found about a certificate of membership for the first Black union. And all of you notice I'm not using the term African American at all, and I'm not going to use it. And just so for those people that weren't on before, the reason that I don't use African American because African Americans does not mean Black, because if I am a white, blue-eyed, blonde hair South African, I am an African American, but I'm not Black. And that's a name that they gave us. So I either use Black or people of color, or a person of color. And I wanted, this is starting, and a lot of us knew about A. Philip Randolph. And this is a picture of them marching to start the Brotherhood of the Sleeping Car Porters, a union that was formed in August 25th, 1925 in New York City. This union was led by A. Philip Randolph. And it wasn't an all Black union, but it was a predominantly Black union. And it was designed because sleeping cars on trains were manned by Black men, and they were treated real bad. They worked long hours. They were spit on. They were called all kinds of derogatory names. So they had a tough life. So they formed this union, and the company that had the sleeping car is called the Pullman Company. And the reason that they made A. Philip Randolph the leader of this company was because he was not a Pullman. So they couldn't fire him because of his union activities. So this is starting the beginning of more Black labor. And there's so many of them. I wish I had the time to just tell you all about it, the research that I've done and shown all different kinds of ways that our brothers and sisters, but mostly brothers at this time, had to fight just to work. This was the sleeping part. This was formed in 1925, and that was just before the Great Depression. Now here's another picture. Civil rights leader Afield Randolph was chosen to be the leader because he didn't, like I said, he didn't work with him. This is a picture of him and more of the sleeping car porters. All right. Then we move fast forward to, or during that period of time, not so much fast forward, but talk about the great migration of labor, of Black people. And most of us can identify with this. I know I can, because I picked this because this almost looks like my father's, but my father had a truck and we would load it up. My sister, who is, I think she's on, my mother had her in her arms. My mother was sitting in the middle. I was riding shotgun. My father was driving, and we had all our worldly goods on that truck. And my sister was probably five or 6 months old, something like that. But this just kind of reminded me of our journey from North Carolina to DC. But the Great Migration was a mass movement of, listen to this, of about 5 million Southern Blacks to move north, and between 1915 to 1960. During that initial wave, a majority of Blacks moved from two major cities such as Chicago, Illinois, Detroit, Michigan, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, New York City, all these places. And then later on, a lot of them, that was the initial wave. During the second, third, and fourth, and all, and then how people started to move west, north and west. They headed to California, to Los Angeles, to Oakland, to San Francisco. Then they all migrated to Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington. And a lot of us don't know that there's a lot of Black people living in Seattle, Washington, believe me. I've been there, and I've met my time, I've met people in Seattle and in Portland, Oregon. So the point of all this is to show you that there's been this migration, that we started out, but we had, being Black labor, we started out as geniuses, and we were building civilizations. And then they wanted to degrade us, put us in our place, and make us feel like we are inferior because we cannot build anything. And that's the point of some of these lectures. We need to start looking back and building stuff. Black people don't own hardly anything. We make a lot of money. We spend a lot of money. We spend money on clothes. We spend money on cars. We spend money on housing, furniture. But we don't own furniture companies. We don't own a furniture manufacturing company. We don't own a car company. If we were back in Egypt or Kemet, we were in command. There weren't any white people there. Eventually, the Romans came and Greeks and stole our stuff, and we'll get into that maybe a little bit later on in another lecture. This one I thought was very interesting. It's the 1943 Packard Company race strike. And some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not. Thursday, June the 3rd, in 1943, at 1:30 a.m., white workers walked out of the Detroit Packard Motor Company plant because 3 Black machinists were promoted and upgraded to the front line, or to the final line, assembly line, of the aviation engines. And for those that are not technically aware, aviation engines were rolled by Rolls-Royce, which was built in this factory. So airplanes were flying engines that now Black people were starting to build. Rolls-Royce engines, which most AIM airplanes today run off of most of the jets run off of Rolls-Royce engines. So let me elaborate on this particular one. They had a strike because the three machinists were upgraded and put in the front line. But they said, well, we didn't strike because they were promoted or upgraded. We were striking because we had to work alongside Black people. Now, all this information I got from the Library of Congress, and tell you. So they decided to go on strike, and then there were 2,500 Black people that worked at this plant. 1,500 of those Black people said, well, we're going to counter strike because the three Black machinists end up getting fired by a foreman. So they went back and forth, but what they found out later on, that the Ku Klux Klan was behind them walking out and being on strike, all the white people, because of the three machinists. Well, the union that they belonged to presented that evidence to the Packard Company, and they eventually gave them those three machinists that back, because they found out, again, that the Ku Klux Klan was behind the whole thing. But those are the kind of things our people have had to deal with. And some of the stuff we've dealt, if nothing else, white people have gotten better and better and better at deception, deceiving us, making us think that we are okay. And I'm going to talk about that too. Okay, moving fast forward. Again, the National Labor Relations Act in 1935 was signed by, as you can see here, Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt. And so this was supposed to make labor unions a little bit more safe and a little bit more open. And you had an act that eventually became the National Relationship Board. And I found out that Obama had a Black guy in charge of that board around in 2015. But these are not only were we still progressing, but we still had to fight for every inch that we've had to succeed. And some of you may have parents, grandparents that were part of some of this. And the only reason I put Kennedy's picture up here, because Kennedy the act that I've just showed you was signed in 1935, but it wasn't until 1960 that Kennedy formed the National Labor Relations Board that would be true to its original mission of helping people move from lower class to middle class, because they were working in unions, and they got union pay. And most important, it ruled that was the majority of workers that wanted the boards did, if a majority of the people in a plant, Black or white, wanted the workers to become unionized, this law would allow them that they had to look at becoming a union. So again, another protection based on all the things that we've already been through. And this is now this one. This is Lyndon B. Johnson. And after Kennedy's assassination, Lyndon Baines Johnson won the 1964 election with the largest majority since 1824. And veto proof, he ended up also with kind of like which Biden started out with. They end up with Democrats in both the House and the Senate. So they gave him veto proof. So
Mr. Tyrone.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Marilyn. Okay, I'll wait till she come back. But he signed into law this, at that time, this was called the Civil Rights Bill. And the Civil Rights Bill gave them, it was outlawing discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, desegregating public accommodations. And this was the end, so-called the end to segregation. And you can see, I don't know if you can recognize, but this person right here is Thurgood Marshall. And this,
So it is him.
It is him, yes. And this is the other black one of
Andrews. Is that Andrew Young?
No, this is a black senator.
Yeah.
If I'll leave that open. If anybody can tell me who this black senator is, because he wasn't the first one, because the first one was way back in the 1800s.
Senator Brooks from Massachusetts.
Oh,
Edward
there you
Brooks.
go. I knew I could count on somebody. Edward Brooks, exactly. That's who it is.
Mhm.
Yep.
Massachusetts.
You're from Massachusetts. Thank you, James. So,
Thank you, Mr. James.
so the bill was decided. I want to go run through what this bill did, because it did a lot. Not only for desegregation, public accommodations, and making, outlawing segregation, but it did away with poll tax in southern states that were trying to restrict people. And this is the term, how they came up with the term affirmative action, and the bill, the law that the Supreme Court just struck down. Well, this is the start of it, because it had what they call federal contractors to affirmatively act to hire more Blacks and prohibit discrimination in rental housing, in mortgage establishment, in establishing Medicare for elderly, Medicare for the poor, establishing food stamps, for Head Start. The list goes on. The Jobs Corps, the federal aid to poor for primary and secondary schools, and investment in public universities, urban mass transit, job training, urban renewal jobs, housing subsidies, abolishing national origin quotas. And most people don't know that they had a quota of how many people could come in from different countries, and mostly countries of people of color. And they also established the Clean Water Act, quality standards and safety standards for cars, fair labeling, like in one of my health classes, I talk about food labeling. This bill established that. People had to, manufacturers had to start putting on what was in that box of that can. And they also extended labor standards to cover 9 million more workers, improved into the minimum wage, and they call it the federal minimum wage. But that did not necessarily increase the density of unions, but because this was in part of the Industrial Revolution, but But that bill, all those things that I just named was what that bill that Johnson acted, made those changes. A lot of them they've tried to, like the affirmative action is the biggest one out of that they've tried to turn around. They got that, you know, if a Republican got in there, they tried to squash a lot of those things. Marilyn, I'm sorry, Marilyn, you had your hand up.
Yes, I have one question. Now, would the, you know, back in the day, and I know it's still going on, especially in my neighborhood, ground rent, where did that come from? Was that something that they were supposed to stop?
No, a lot of, normally states have ground rent. When somebody, and it allowed landowners that own the ground, not the property owner, the landowner, to be able to have people build apartment buildings, build rental places in on their land, but they would, because they wouldn't sell their land, they would rent it to them. So you had to pay ground rent, and a lot of states still have that in place.
Yeah, we have it here. I
Yeah,
thought that,
you have it in some places in Maryland. Yes. So, but all of these, and the ghettos that we have were designed by the federal government. They made places like ghettos, and that's why, you know, I'm an advocate. We got to stop looking at our Black children and looking at our people that live in the ghettos as being subpar to us. If we become middle class, because it's not their fault. They've been brainwashed over years. They've been put in those conditions because there are a lot of laws, and I'm going to talk about real estate. That's one of my upcoming lectures. I'm going to talk about how they made ghettos, how the federal government had laws that would not allow Blacks to get mortgages in certain neighborhoods, that they allowed white soldiers coming back from World War I to get property on the GI Bill, but they wouldn't allow men to get, Black men to do that. Eventually some did, but that's how they built. Ghettos just didn't pop up. They were designed in every city in this United States by the federal government and white supremacy. Because the federal government at that time was run by mostly white supremacy. It still is. Okay. This is the kind of the Black, this is what I call a backlash against this. And this is starting with Nixon and extending to Donald Trump. Conservative politicians wrote a new playbook to activate racial fears. And most of you are privy to it and understand that. They use terms like, while lifting up white people as a silent majority. And that's why we have to learn to listen to the code words that white people use. Just like, you know, Trump saying, you know, make America great again. What he means is make America white again. But America's never been white, all white, never. Because soon, the only time they were maybe, let me take that back. For a short period of time before the first slave stepped on here was the only time that it's been all white. But that didn't include the native Indians, because it wasn't all white, because and the country didn't belong to them. We stole it. Or, I mean, white people, they stole the country. They've stolen everything that they've stolen our history back from Egyptian times. You remember back on, I gave you a list of all the things that we've invented. So they use the term, oh, we are real Americans.
or they use that word pure.
Yeah,
Gotta be pure.
yeah. And then, you know,
You
they're
have
not,
one drop impurity in you.
yeah. People who play, white people are people who play by the rules, while publicly displaying empathy for the middle class or working people. And it's all a forest. Instruct your political appointees to dismantle labor protections. Those things that I was just talking about that they signed, that Johnson signed, they are trying to dismantle all those things one by one. And that's what Trump's, and bring kind of, you go real fast forward. A couple of weeks ago, Trump's political team, his Republican playbook, basically said that he wants to have absolute power. He wants to be able to dismantle a lot of the departments that the federal government has, the FBI. Naturally, he won't do the FBI because they're the ones that, and the Department of Justice. But all these other ones that protect us, the Department of Labor, Department of Defense, all these different ways. He wants to be able to have sole power, unlimited power, if he gets elected. And that was on the news a couple of weeks ago. They want to restrict union activities and undermine civil rights protections. This is kind of my call to arms. We got to wake up. Please. All right, protesting for jobs and justice. We've gone through all of this. In the past 100 years, labor was able to grow its power into union-supported political environment in just 3 administrations: Roosevelt's New Deal, the Kennedy-Johnson administration, the one I just showed you, and Obama and the Obama administration. Each time labor and Blacks together started electing the president. We increased our vote. We have tremendous voting power. But we got to get more people, because most of us vote. But if you know anybody, we got to start getting those numbers up and getting our vote. And even Obama came on TV and did, how you change all this. You can't have a riot and change every stuff. You got to do it at the ballot box, because if you start rioting, they're gonna shoot you. And they're still trying to figure out ways to keep you from the ballot box.
You know, Mr. Tyrone, Reverend P.M. Smith had said something in a while, it was months back. They was holding a meeting, like a forum meeting, and they invited all the people from city hall, all the
Right.
councilmen. And it was like nobody showed up. And he said, back then, you remember all these people that didn't come and support their district. And all this is going on. You remember them because you got to get them out of there.
Yeah.
And the only way is voting. You got to get them out of there. Majority of them been there too long anyway. They're not doing anything for us.
And that's where we've got to be a little bit more critical. Just because a person is Black, that we want to vote for him, like Tim Scott. Now you heard me too use the term Uncle Tom and Sambo. Well, Tim Scott is a Sambo. He's not an Uncle Tom. And because he uses his struggling as an African American and the affirmative action program that he came up on, but he's lying about stuff and saying that, oh, America is not racist anymore. And he knows it is, but he's trying to appease white people. And so many of our people, you know, we got to start taking a second look at people that are these politicians. What are you going to do? We got to ask for them to start doing more than just playing the game. Inclusion, diversity, all of that stuff is BS. Because all that means is that you trying to be like white people. They want you to be like them. They want you to buy into their way of thinking. And we don't think the same way they do. We don't have the same background. We don't have the same experiences. We gotta start being more active. Because if Trump ever gets back in, our boat is sunk. That ark that had all these black people on it is sunk.
Do you think he has a chance of getting in?
I wish I had, Ms. Wright, I wish I had a crystal ball and could say that.
I just wondered how you felt like, just from your gut.
I think he won't make it if our people are raised up and we, just like we came out to vote for Obama. If we can get that kind of turnout when Trump runs, if he's, because more than, I do think, and I do think this, that he will be the Republican nominee. Yes.
Even with all the indictments.
They're not, there's no law that says that because they left it open. And hopefully someday they will change that, but there's no law that says, even if he's indicted, even if he's in jail, that he can't run for president.
I know,
Yeah,
but
they
I was
said
just
that.
thinking, I was just thinking about the American people's conscience. Like, why would you vote for someone that you know has all of this? When is that going to kick in at some point? You would just
But how, very, very good question. Thank you for asking that. The reason that it doesn't matter to them because they don't care. That's not what their goal is. Their goal is not to bring in somebody that's going to, develop different policies that are for them. What they care about, the game plan is that to turn this country into a fascist or a dictatorship. If they turn it to a dictatorship, they can do with away with the Constitution. Trump would have ultimate power, and you don't have to have, there won't be any civil rights. He will decide on who lives or dies, who has a job, who doesn't. That's
but those very white people are the ones that's going to be impacted because they poor.
yeah, but
You got some blacks up in there too.
yeah,
But you know what?
exactly.
You got some bigoted blacks up in there.
Well,
All I can say is he can get locked up and be in jail and still run for president. And if he is elected, he's elected.
Yeah, he could
from jail.
He could be the first person that's running for president that is in jail or indicted or out on bond or whatever, depending on, it's a timing thing right now. And if they don't convict him before, I would say somewhere around September of next year, about a year from there, if they don't convict him of something,
Or
the Department of Justice has a rule that they kind of back off 90 days out from election. An election is in November. So he could have an ankle bracelet on, but be running the White House. But
exactly.
the key to it is because they're trying to suppress, because they know this. And that's why I put this up here, register to vote, but also on the right-hand side, let's vote. You gotta register more people, you gotta vote. And if you get people to register and vote at the level of when Obama ran, black people and white people, because it's named for a different reason, is to keep Trump from winning. But they're gonna do everything that they can to suppress the black vote. They've been started. They got all these different laws across the country. You can look at some of them. they're saying they're taking up, some of them are doing away with mail-ins. Some of them want to, change how many polls are. They're intimidating poll people. It's two Black women just are suing Giuliani about things that they said because they were poll workers, and that's all designed to intimidate people. People are afraid to go and be poll workers, depending on which especially if you're in a southern state or a northern state or Midwest state. So all these things, but to get back to your question, I think he won't win if we vote in numbers. You can't stop everybody from, if you come out, you can come up, put all kinds of barriers up there. But we know how to get around barriers. We've been doing it all our lives. We go over the fence, we dig under the fence, tunnel, we'll figure out another way. And the same thing for Hispanics. So we got to figure out a way to get more people and more young people, because that's where the numbers.
Yes, that's where it's at.
That's where the numbers keep increasing.
I think they're trying to work on this though, because didn't someone say Cornel West is like lobbying to run, splitting our vote? I mean, what is going on?
Well, I have a few things to say about Cornel West, and they're probably not real nice things, so I'm going to refrain from talking about it. So, he knows that.
Why would you split our vote at a time that's so critical? But anyway, that'll get back on task. The voting thing is just triggering so many things. When you see, they always got one. I guess he's the Herschel Walker now, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. Most of you know that Cornel West is married to a white woman.
No.
Yeah. Yep.
I did not know that.
Another Clarence Thomas, huh?
No, Clarence Thomas is on a mountain all by himself. Nobody can be as bad as Clarence Thomas, because Clarence Thomas doesn't even believe he's white. I mean, Black anymore. He is. I talked about Sambos. He is the king of the Sambos. But going back to, we got to do more voter registration, because all labor, and how I related to, let's say, Black labor, because we picketed for us to get the right to be in unions, have a job, and they go through some of the same things that we have in registering, because when they picket, they got results, and we got to picket, we got to get results, we got to get people to vote. Look at this line of people at a church, and the line of women there getting ready to vote. We got to create these lines of voting and registering and making change.
I think the older people like myself, we understand what they went through to get us to vote. And now it's just like we just got to, get it in these younger generations' head. Look, these people went through hell and back just to, so they can vote.
Yeah.
So we have the opportunity to vote. We have a say. And you can't blame nobody if you don't vote.
People died, were lynched, hung, decapitated, brutally beat, so that we will have the right to vote now. But this is, and I did this picture on purpose, because this is, and I'm gonna read it. I'll tell you what this is. But white people that, in part, that are white supremacists are afraid that now we are gaining too much power, and if we don't do something, and go back to Ms. Wright's question, that's why that needle hasn't changed much as far as Donald Trump's support among white supremacists. Those that his base, and I think right now they said it's around 56% of the Republicans are going to vote for him. And that base hasn't moved, and they've stuck with him. They don't care if he's indicted. They don't care because they ultimately know he is the great white hope now. He is their only hope, but that's what they believe. So let me move back and talk about this new factory workers, because I want to talk about how this impacts us. In an industry or occupation traditionally staffed by white men, management has deliberately and unconscious bias to recruit individuals who look like themselves. And we all know that. New factory workers are often recruited through the formal and informal personal networks of the existing staff, which are white people. This is how implicit or unconscious bias operates. To recruit more people of color, management must change its recruiting practices. Hire more people because, and this goes also back to the affirmative action program. Have any of you heard of the legacy policy that they kind of applied to colleges and university? That they should change their legacy policy if they want to start bringing in more people of color. Well, for those that don't know what the legacy policy is, let me explain.
Let me tell you what it is.
Yeah, James, I know you know. Go ahead.
It's basically cases, if my father went to Harvard, then I'd have a bigger chance of going to Harvard than you because your father didn't go to Harvard. That's a legacy
Exactly.
policy.
That's what a policy is. And that mostly applies to that
White folks.
Right. And it doesn't matter that the person may not be qualified, but they will be giving special passes in order to come to that university. So
Right.
that's one of the ways they stay white. But the Supreme Court kind of, said, maybe a lot of these universities, if you got rid of that legacy policy, maybe don't need affirmative action. And they kind of hinted on that's the way to do it. So my understanding, there have been quite a few colleges that have said that they would do away with them, but not enough of them. Not enough of the Ivy League schools.
How did that fit in with them parents going to jail for paying them off? So the kids could go.
Oh, well, I know what you're talking about. Some of the Hollywood stars that paid money, because their children weren't part of the legacy policy, because they wouldn't have to have paid it. But their children evidently were not either smart enough to pass and get into college on their own. So they figured out other ways. They got money, they're millionaires, multimillionaires. So they paid for basically their kids to be let into those schools. Because once they get in, not a whole lot of places, they ask you where you graduated from. You say Harvard, they don't go next step and say, were you an A student? Were you a B student? Were you a C student? Were you a D student? But you graduated. So they're not the smartest and the brightest all the time, but they went to the school. So they must have some smarts and they graduated. But sometimes that's debatable whether or not they graduated. And that's what a lot of the parents got in trouble for. But I just wanted to say this, and this is what happens to a lot of us and this wasn't too long ago, because I know I came up in the 60s and the 70s and was working for a company. And that was when they had, they had a policy that were trying to hire more Black people. They weren't using, a friend, because they just opened it up and kind of gave the impression that, more Black people were welcome to come into some of these companies that have always been all white. So, but if you got if all the recruiters are all white, and they've used different techniques to let people know that this is a Black person. They used to put some kind of coding on the application, or based on the name. If Tyrone came in and won a job, the assumption is Tyrone is Black. Because there are not a whole lot of white people named Tyrone, except for Tyrone Powers, and that's a whole nother thing. But there's not a whole lot of Black people named Tyrone, or Lakeisha, or, you know,
Yeah,
all these different names that we have that say, you know, make us stand out. We're not John Smith or Tim Scott.
yeah, my nephew's like that. He had 5 kids, and he'd be darned if he was gonna name them Shadon and all that, because they will already know what, you know, your color is. And
Exactly.
he said he named his son Kobe. I said, well, we got Kobe Bryant, you know.
Well,
but
let me. I'm gonna quickly tell you a story. And my wife knows the story. I met a young lady that I met a gentleman. He and his wife came to my front porch, and they were Jehovah's Witness. And the interesting story about the gentleman, he just came from Nigeria. He's only been here like maybe about 2 years. I'm not talking about any religion or anything with it, but he was saying he was having a hard time finding a job because he went to university in Nigeria, and he had multiple degrees in IT. But he couldn't, it was hard for him to find a job. Now, in today's environment, how is it the person that's an IT graduate is having, if you want a job, you should be able to find one. But he has a Nigerian name. So that told them that he's Black already. So and he admitted, he said, I'm starting to see the racism in America because it's hard for me to get a job. I've been here 2 years and I can't find a job. So all these little small things. Let me move on because I'm way past my time. I just want to get into this Black Lives Matter thing. Police violence against Black people has been a problem in America since the first time that we stepped foot on Black soil, in American soil, excuse me. A century ago, state violence was a problem for striking union members too. And some observers say that if workers had not been striking, they would not have been shot. And I just want you to think about that. They're talking about union people. They're saying if they had not been on strike, they would not have been shot. If we were not protesting out for our justice and our freedom, and we got shot, then it's our fault because we shouldn't have been out there protesting. Colin Kaepernick taking that knee. The NFL just shot him down again. No NFL owner is going to bring Kaepernick back because of that. He's a great quarterback. They know he has skills, and the NFL needs good quarterbacks. They have a great need, but they voted
blackball. They blackballed
they basically, continue to. Well, they already blackballed them, but continue with the blackball. They made the ball bigger. Okay, so that was my point of putting this here, is that the Black labor and the unions have a lot in common with what's going on with Black people. And these are some of the people, the George Floyds in the middle of the Trayvon Martins. All right, getting to the last slide. So this is it for those that are still here. This is kind of my wrap up. Stand tall and together to accomplish a goal. Promoting equal opportunity and ensuring that working people can join a union to represent them on their jobs to enforce labor laws and standards is not a magical cure-all for deep-seated racial prejudice. When the number of good union jobs declined, the competition for these jobs increased and can play out across racial lines. And so this is part of the problem. I remember hearing somebody, I think it was on TV, and they were talking, and he said he wasn't a white supremacist, but he had a job, but he was talking about Black women. He said all these women have all these education, going to school, and they're taking my job. And that's just basically the same thing. Because Black women are one of the most educated group of people in America. Better training, better recruiting, talking about police, community policing, body cameras will not prevent racial profiling and are too quick to resort to violence by every police officer. If you're Black, they're going to stop you, stop and frisk. Oh, I'm sorry. All right. But police violence against Black people has been a problem in America since the first time we stepped foot on here, like I said before. So they are going to continue to. But you know, most police, how the police actually came about, and this is just a tidbit of history. Police departments were developed for runaway slaves. Slave masters and get slave hunters, and those eventually became the police because they were designed to protect the property of the slave owner from Blacks rioting, Blacks running away, burning down their houses, unruly Blacks, so that they so-called. So that's how police departments developed over time. And they were designed to keep white people safe from Black people, from the slaves, or now ones that were slaves, and after the Emancipation Proclamation, they were free, but they were designed to, you know, become law enforcement officers, because they, you know, a lot of them were ruthless. They didn't care. They didn't have a problem with sticking their foot on a Black person, shooting a Black person in the back. They don't care. So that's kind of the end of this, but this is all in relationship. And I want to say this is that all of this stuff is wrong. We can't accept what's the standard anymore. Our lives matter, and we have a right to expect more from our federal government, from ourselves. But we got to start doing some things too. We just can't wait, sit back and say, oh, I'm okay. I got a nice house. I got a nice job. I'm safe. I'm okay. I got a good education. I'm safe. I'm okay. Wrong, 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 wrong. Because if Trump gets back in there, the color of your skin gonna matter. No, I don't care how many degrees you have, whatever. If you go into a fascist state, I saw, I think it was on MSNBC a couple of days ago, they were defining what fascism is. And that they were comparing him to Hitler. Well, he's not there yet because he hasn't gotten that kind of power to put people in concentration camps and there. But it is the beginning. That's how Hitler started. That's how the Italian president, Mussolini, thank you. So and we think we are safe. The Jews thought they were safe. They, because by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. If we don't wake up, we were saying, well, I'm safe. I'm an educated person. I got this, and I got a home. I got a gun now. I got an alarm system. But they're constantly nipping away at the power of the laws. We are a nation of laws. That's what keeps us civil. keep us going. But if the laws start to change and was that slavery was legal, hanging somebody was legal, killing hardly any white person ever went to jail for killing a black because of the laws. So laws don't mean nothing if people don't enforce them, or depending on who's passing them. So my question and my thing to you, and let me go back to where I want to go, because I want to wrap this up. I'm gonna stop this. My question to everybody when we were going through, and I put it out there, does anybody have an answer of what the Washington Monument? James, you can't answer that because I know you know.
It was a phallic symbol.
Huh?
It was a phallic symbol because of that Egyptian story where the body was dismembered and all of that.
Well, it represents the first Immaculate Conception. That's what I wanted to say. That's what the Washington Monument represents. And let me, for those that are new, let me just kind of go over it. The first Immaculate Conception was between Isis and Osiris and Seth. Seth was the brother of Osiris. Osiris was the king of Egypt. His wife was Isis. They got married. Seth was a jealous brother. He wanted Isis for himself, so he killed his brother, dismembered him, cut him up into 14 pieces. Isis went throughout Egypt and found 13 of the 14 pieces. The piece that she did not find was his penis. They think it was eaten by alligators because they threw it in the Nile River. So, but she prayed to the gods and asked for a son. She became pregnant. It was called an Immaculate Conception. And the son is named Osiris or Horus. But what she asked the Egyptian sculptors to do to represent his penis that was lost, to make an obelisk or a tekken, which is in the shape of the Washington Monument. But their obelisk and a tekken was one solid piece of granite, like you have in outside in Italy, the square in outside the Pope's residence. You see them in graveyards. But just think, every time that you see one of those, you see the Washington Monument, you think about that. Now that's fact. That's not Tyrone making this up.
Yeah, I kind of misspoke.
So that is what it represents. The Washington Monument represents a penis, and it represents the first Immaculate Conception. But it also represents how they stole that information from and changed it to Mary and Joseph for their Immaculate Conception. But Horus and Isis' Immaculate Conception is over 6,000 years old. That is carved in stone, written in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt or Kemet. You show me something that is written someplace else, because our people wanted to make sure that things were left for us to be able to read and know about. The Sphinx, excuse me, what I've just said, the Washington the monuments, the statues, the pyramids, they left. And if you go to the Valley of the Kings, and I'm going to talk about a lot of this next week, I'm going to talk about the 42 rules of Mayat. That was the morality for our people, not the 10 Commandments, for morality that was written, that was written in 4142 BC. That was over 6,000 years ago when that happened, and it's on the walls in Egypt, or Kemet. Food for thought. All I'm trying to do is expand your mind, expand your thought process. We need to get out of this box of how we thinking about stuff and open up and look at other stuff. Because if I Tyrone is no genius, but if I can look all this stuff up and find the information and get indoctrinated, you can do the same thing. All our people can do the same thing. And what I'm trying to do is instill the pride in our people about how great we were, how great we still are, and stop buying into what they tell us we are. Stop letting them define us. We have the ability to define ourselves. We get caught up, and it's kind of like when I teach class in health, and I tell people, I say, you spend a lot, because people say, oh, well, it costs too much to get healthy. And I said, well, how much money do you spend on clothes? How much money do you spend looking good? Putting up on, I'm not picking on women, but putting on a wig, makeup, or buying a suit and tie for men, buying expensive shoes. We spend a lot of money looking good on the outside, and don't spend enough money taking care of our inside, because our insides look like crap. We're dying of heart attacks and strokes. We're dying of cancer. We're dying of Alzheimer's. We keep looking for the white man to make this magic bullet to get us safe. Oh yeah, they're gonna come up with something. If you believe that, I got a bridge I want to sell you. We got to start waking up to what is happening and in this country to us. And we got to start thinking about us. When I talked about schools back when I did the educational series, we got to start taking schools in our hand, because what Carter G. Woodson said, we allowing white people that enslaved us, that beat us, that put their foot on our neck to educate our children. I don't know about you, but that don't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I thought I was kind of educated. I know my wife thought she's kind of educated. Until you start reading the real stuff and start opening up your eyes to what's going on, it's imperative that we start looking at this. And I'm going to keep on fighting. Like I said, next week, next 2 weeks, I'm going to talk about religion and how religion has sold us a bill of goods. Because just like I said before, if every Black church in America deposited their money in a Black bank and gave out loans to Black businesses, gave out loans to Black to buy churches, buy schools, buy homes, that would have a significant impact on the wealth gap here. We can't keep trying to be inclusive, because as long as we keep bringing them into what we are doing, we ain't gonna go nowhere. Because most of them designed, especially white. We don't have a big problem with all white people, and I don't want to ever say that all of them, because not everybody is a white supremacist. Not everybody believes that, and I want to make that clear that that's not what I'm not doing, because I've invited white men and women to come to this. And I don't want them to think that that's what I'm trying to do. But we got to start taking charge. We got to start thinking about building something. We got to start talking to our young people about what they're learning in school. Just, oh, it's nice. I want to have a nice car. I want to have a fur coat. I want to have $500 alligator shoes. I want to have a custom made suit. But I'm dying on the inside because I'm poisoning my body. I'm not spending any money on taking care of my body. I'm not spending any money taking care of my mind, buying books, reading. Okay. I can, I can keep on going, but it is past 8:30, and I know some of y'all want to go ahead and get dinner if you haven't had dinner. I do. I know I want to. So, but I want to open it up before I go. I want to open it up for questions, and I know hopefully I said some things or enlighten you about some things and talking about Black labor. Like I said, the next one is going to be on religion, and then I'm gonna talk about law. And then I'm going to talk about real estate and then go on and on and on. I'm going to add some. I'm probably going to in the next few weeks going to send out a new topic because I'm going to add reparations to the list, and I got a couple of other things that I'm thinking about, and people have given me ideas that I'm going to add to the list. So the list is probably, because right now I think it's at 22, and by the time I finish, it's going to be maybe not finished, but within the next few weeks, it'll probably be up to about 25 topics. But anybody have any questions that they want to ask or statements that they want to say, things that they wanted to do? Anybody?
Is there a reading that you would suggest for next week prior to your presentation?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that question. What I do is every topic that I give, and if you've got a copy of my initial topics, there's a book beside each one. But I have read at least 5 to 10 to 15 books on each topic. So what we were doing it, and we still are doing it, if you want a copy of the material that I use, because I go into the Library of Congress, I use Google Scholar to come up with the information, and I read a lot of books. If I showed you my office, and my wife's always complaining, there are books all over the place. She complains. I don't want to come in here. You need to clean this office up, Tyrone. But I got books everywhere. So, but there's material out there, and we got to start reading stuff that enlightens us, this changes our mindset. Get out of the box that we're in and stop just accepting our bad health. Stop just accepting what they have given us. Stop accepting the brainwashing that they're constantly doing. And that, in fact, Ms. Gilbert, that's one of the books that I'm talking about. The book is called Brainwashing.
Okay.
And the book is written by Tom Burrell. And real quick, Tom Burrell was the owner of the biggest Black advertising company in New York at one point. And he wrote a book, how we are constantly being brainwashed by what we see on TV, by what we listen to in the news, we listen to in local news, the station that we listen to. We have to learn to have a different set of ears, because we have to hear what they're saying, and sometimes most important, what they're not saying. Oh, but yes, but bottom line is yes, I will. I will give, send out a list for this topic and also for next week, because I'm going to talk. There's there's a book, and I've shown it to people all the time. You talk about talking about religion.
Mm-hmm.
There's a book that was written by a white guy, And the title of the book is How to Make a Negro a Christian.
Mm.
There's always been a plan. How do you make Negroes Christian? And the book was written, I think, around in the 1920s and 30s, but it's been reprinted several times. But I actually have 2 copies of it.
Okay.
When I showed it to my wife, who I met at a church, it just kind of blew her mind. But again, the name of the book is How to Make a Negro a Christian. So there's, and I'm not trying to, you know, push down religion. I just want you to understand that Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who I modeled this after, and I pay homage to her. I was at her funeral when she passed away in DC. She talked about white supremacy and racism. That was her title. Not, it didn't come from me. She coined that phrase. And she talked about 9 different areas that white supremacy and racism has impacted us. And what she said, for those that have not read her book called The ISIS Papers, and she was that ISIS Papers is the same ISIS that I just finished talking about the Immaculate Conception. So, but what
Hey, Tyrone. Oh,
yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you know what? And I'm sorry. This is Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Another book. Hey, there's a book called Accomplices to the Crime, and when you talk about convict labor, if you don't want to read the book, there's a movie, Robert Redford. It was Robert Redford and Alfred Kodo, called Brubaker.
Yes.
And that movie was actually based, it was a fictionalized version of what Tyrone is talking about when it comes to convict labor.
Yeah.
Because some of the things that you see in the movie, they fictionalized it by making it more diverse in the culture than it was, because it was predominantly Africans in America, that especially men who were doing the convict labor.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in Arkansas. So that movie Brubaker, if you get a chance, if you want to read books, get a chance to look at the movie. Those are based on real life events. You know, and one of the things when you talk about I'm on the phone, one of the things that they said and you see in the movie, and I think give it away if you haven't seen it, is when they went to dig up the bodies, because they used to call it, it was a horrible name for the prison, but when they went to go dig up the bodies for all of the convict labor that was killed because of the atrocities, they found that the caskets were on average 4 to 5 feet, and the bones in the legs were severed, and it was easier to sever the bones in their legs for convicts that died than to actually build the coffins bigger.
Yes, exactly.
So seeing those things in convict labor today, when you talk about the advent of slavery, we're talking about slavery in itself, it still exists.
Well, that's why I try to go back, and in most of my lectures, I try to go back and give you everybody information, because most people are not into chemet or chematology or ebotology as much as I am, and I know, I realize that, but I'm trying to give you bits and pieces of a world that we were kings and queens. We were also archaeologists. We were mathematicians. We ran the world. We had the first civilizations. And my main thing is to build that pride into us and to our children, that we have this. If you want to put slavery in our history, and our history is this much, slavery is about that much in our history. 250 years, and you're talking about 10,000 years. And there's this thing called acceptance. And when I became a lifestyle coach and a health coach, one of the things that just blew my mind was how people just accepted what white doctors were telling them. You got this disease, you got this, it's incurable, you got to take medication for the rest of your life. And we just accepted that because we were brainwashed to say, doctors walk on water. They are the most educated people around. Start challenging. Challenge your pastor, challenge your teacher, challenge who at work. It's just like I was saying before, we gotta, if you still working, you have a job, you gotta start challenging, well, how does this relate to white supremacy? Is that the 9,000-pound gorilla in the room that you're talking about? Because you're talking about so-called minorities. How are we gonna help them? We're talking about social workers, how are we gonna help them? Talking about all these things, how are we gonna help them? How are we gonna help them stay with it, keep their foot on their neck? That's what they're really doing. Because they keep talking about Band-Aids, Band-Aids, Band-Aids. And not call it. And if I keep putting the Band-Aid on my hand, but I keep doing stupid stuff to cut my hand, I'm not getting anywhere. I need to go to the origin and find out why this is occurring. If I can fix or work on the initial problem of racism and white supremacy, why we can't get ahead, why we don't do this, why we don't do that, and why they pick certain one of us to allow them to go through the system and become well-known, become maybe wealthy. Because you know, if they allow you to become wealthy, they want something for it.
In Tyrone?
Yes.
Yeah, the other thing was it is a good representation in that latest movie by Charlemagne the God with 88. If you haven't, that I sent you.
Right. Okay.
If you haven't seen it, you may want to look at it.
Thank you for bringing that up, Craig. Before we close, I always say, but I always want to thank everybody that has donated to my cause, because you know that I wrote this, I do all the research, and those that have donated, some people have donated money. I'm not telling you about how much, and some people have donated cards, Amazon cards or gift cards. All of those things are welcome, because I want to keep this series going, and I just want to thank all that have done. You know who you are, that have given to what I'm doing, and the money is good and it's okay, but so many of you have given me good words of encouragement. And I really, really appreciate that, because those words of encouragement, it does keep me going, because I know that there are other people that are listening to me. And all I ask you to do is think outside of the box that you're in. If you keep doing the same old thing, the same old way, and not getting the results, or expect some other results, a lot of you smart people know that that's the definition of insanity. You got to change some things. You got to open up that mind and start figuring out what we're doing. Because what I was saying about how to, because most of you probably never heard of that book, or didn't even know there was a book on how to make a Negro a Christian. But the book is designed to how you brainwash Black people into become Christians for control. That's what Constantine did. And this got a preview. Constantine, in the year 325 AD, pulls a lot of his priests together to make Christianity the religion. There's some other things that went on, and I'm not going to talk about those things, but the Council of Nicaea, if you really read into what it's doing, is That was when he was doing it. And a lot of this stuff is by design, just like the Willie Lynch letter. When a Virginia slave owner, I mean, a slave owner from the Caribbean came to Virginia and taught the Virginia slave owners how to take the chains off of Black people and put the chains on their mind by divide and conquer. Take the Black man out of the family, beat him, degrade him, take the children away from the mother, split them up, pit dark-skinned Blacks against light-skinned Blacks. All these are psychological warfare designed to keep us in turmoil. How many times have you know that somebody either in your family or somebody, oh man, you light skinned, you're a red bone. You know, the Black, if you dark, you're not as smart as somebody that's light. Where do you think that stuff comes from? Ask yourself, where does this stuff come from? What's the origin of it? Once you start figuring out what is the game, and when I talked about, when we started this, I gave you a definition of what white supremacy is. There are 6 rules that white supremacy have. Then the rule, and the one that's most important, was deception. And that is smoke and mirrors. They're deceiving you, deceiving all of us. I'm just glad that I spent 20 years before I kind of moved away from Western life, but 20 years I was in a white world, and I didn't hardly see the other when I came home, because I was traveling all over the country, but I was mostly with white people, and I started to understand how deceptive and how conniving they are. And I'm talking about mainly white men, because the world doesn't have a problem. The world has a white man problem, because they're the ones that's causing all the turmoil and dictatorships. Very seldom have you seen a female of color trying to be a dictator. I'm not saying that they have. You have some in Africa, Idi Amin and all of them have been dictators, but they learned that stuff from white people. It wasn't something that by design. So we just got to keep thinking. All right, it's way past my bedtime, way past your bedtime too. So I want to thank all of you for being there, and thank you for your contributions. And if you have a penny, please send it to me. I agree. I will worship it at the altar of your foot for that penny as much as anything else. But anyway, thank you so much, all of you, for keeping this alive. Pass the word on to more other people. I want this to grow. I want this to be something, not so much that I'm proud of, but something you are proud of it, and to be a part. And if you have any suggestions on topics or things that I should do, I welcome it. I mean, I get people who send me all kinds of suggestions, and I want you to talk about this, and I want to include this. So I welcome it. You make me smarter, but you make yourself smarter too. Love you. Be safe. Everybody have a great evening. I always want to mention my wife is my producer, my my partner in crime. I have a board of advisor, my daughter in Atlanta, my nephew, he's not here, my cousin rather, he's not here. Craig Waddy is one of my advisors. My wife is one of them. And Betty, I don't think Betty, was Betty here today? She wasn't, okay. And and one of my youngest sons who is kind of one of my advisors. Oh, and last but not least, but one of the most important in my life is my sister. And she's one of my closest advisors. So I want to thank all the people that helped me and helped me put these lecture series together, because it is a daunting task, because there's just so much information out there. And I really don't have a problem finding the information. My problem is just trying to figure out how to put it together and put it in a condensed form, because there's just so much information out there, so much good information. And
not to mention the fact that I'm trying to get you out of your comfort zone, trying to get you into a bigger venue, but you keep slacking your feet on me.
yeah, she is, and we are going to, and I also, Marsha Juice is on, and she's also has decided that she's going to help me do that also. So I've got a lot of, I'm a strong Black man, but I got a stronger group of Black women behind me that make me who I am. And I have no problem in saying it. I would not be here if it wasn't for a woman. And I would not be here for a lot of women that have helped me over the years. So I thank all of you. I commend all of you for what you do. And thank you so much. Children, relatives, friends, thank you again. Good night, everybody. Everybody have a great, unless there's some closing remarks. Anybody else want to say anything before we go? Okay. Good night. See you in 2 weeks on August the 14th is the next class, and that's the one that's going to be on religion. I'm going to try my best not to offend anybody, but I'm going to give you just some facts.
You know you.
What'd you say? What'd you say, Doris?
I said, you know you.
Oh yeah.
I've been under the weather, but I have a brand new great-grandson.
Oh, congratulations, Doris.
Congratulations.
Thursday.
Wow. A girl or a boy? Oh, you said grandson.
Great-granddaughter.
Great-granddaughter. Wow.
Okay.
Yes.
Congratulations. And
Thank you. Thank you.
you're
Love
welcome.
you. Girl. Love you much.
Take care. Good night, everybody.
Okay.
Marsha, I'm sorry I missed your call. I know I'll talk to you tomorrow. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Okay.